This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the Task Force on Council Representation's virtual open house. My name is Tony Ramos, and I'm the Public Engagement Manager for the City of Vancouver. Hang on, didn't really hit that. This is this evening's agenda. Welcome. There are going to be some GoToMeeting tips that we will go over just for everyone's benefit. This meeting is being recorded. We encourage everyone after this event to please take the council's survey on BeHeardVancouver.org and just click on the graphic icon that you see there in your corner to take you to their actual project page. We will begin with introducing our task force members. For in-depth background on the work of this task force, you can also find those items on their Be Heard Vancouver project page as well. We will go over the proposed approaches and various strategies to encourage representation on Vancouver City Council, and then have a question and answer period. Feel free that if you have any comments to list them in the chat and/or questions. So just some tips for remote participation. Please keep yourself on mute when not speaking. You can submit a written question using the chat or make a comment. Any comments will be collected and provided to the entire task force after this meeting. When it's your turn to speak, I will unmute you or ask you to unmute. And please just be sure to say your name and affiliation, if any, before speaking. Just some GoToMeeting tips for those of you who may not have used it. If you need to increase the size of what you're seeing on the screen, there is a camera icon with a plus and minus sign. You can use those to make items bigger or smaller. The little bubble up top is where you can chat, and then down at the bottom shows you how to mute yourself and use your camera. Everybody here is named appropriately, but if you need to change your name, this is how you would do that by clicking the GoToMeeting triangle to do that. The task force is composed of Mary Elkin, Tanisha Harris, Pat Gelada, Amory Marks, Michael Martin, Diana Perez, and Glenn Young. And Mr. Young is joining us this evening on this presentation. So the council has some proposed approaches, the first being ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting allows voters the option to rank candidates in order of preference, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. If your vote cannot help your top choice win, your vote counts for your next choice. And for additional details about this particular item, be sure to visit the Be Heard Vancouver project page. Another proposed approach is nomination of councilors by district. This divides the city into geographic districts. To be eligible, a candidate would need to reside in the district in which they are pursuing office. Another approach is a hybrid of the first two, ranked choice voting with geographical districts. So strategies for increasing representation on council. Increasing access and representation on city council, and these are those items. Expanding the size of city council, providing financial assistance to candidates running for city council, a charter amendment instituting term limits, advocating for state law changes to allow local elections in even number years, and provide diversity, equity, and inclusion training to council, boards, and commissions. Some of the strategies being pursued to increase access to city council by reducing participation barriers include providing American Sign Language interpretation at meetings, providing free transportation to city council meetings, providing childcare at council, board, and commission meetings, providing free internet throughout the city so that residents can have access to those meetings online, provide audio and video recordings of council, board, and commission meetings, and conducting council meetings at varied locations throughout the city to encourage participation. Working with community organizations to provide financial assistance programs for council, boards, and commissions, and to conduct regular listening sessions and community forums and town hall meetings. So some of the strategies to empower neighborhoods and communities through increased outreach include assigning city councilors to specific neighborhood associations, and also highlighting the function and contributions of neighborhood associations and community-based organizations. The task force is recommending empowering neighborhoods and communities by investing in neighborhood associations and community organization relationships by providing low or no cost gratuity to neighborhood association leaders, regular updates to city council from neighborhood associations and community organizations, providing neighborhood associations virtual and in-person meeting facilities, providing neighborhood associations free childcare to increase participation in meetings, providing neighborhood associations and community organizations diversity, equity, and inclusion training, providing tours of city operations, and inviting neighborhood associations and community organizations to meetings when agenda items directly affect them. Some new and enhanced strategies for diversity and equity and inclusion include sponsoring participants in Leadership Clark County, setting policy prioritizing appointment of candidates to council from underrepresented groups, reviewing boards and commissions appointment process with a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, actively recruiting candidates from underrepresented groups for service on boards and commissions, and providing new resident welcome information in multilingual formats to introduce City Council, its boards and commissions, and general information about Vancouver city government. Some additional strategies include providing stipends for boards and commission service, which could include providing low-cost gratuities for service on boards and commissions, providing stipends for service on boards and commissions, and lastly, increasing outreach staffing levels. One of the ways that we are looking to develop community leadership capacity is creating a citizen academy, fostering city participation in forums with diverse residents and community groups, providing leadership training for boards and commissions, formulation of a youth council, formulation of a city internship program, host a shadow counselor program, and council presentations to high school government classes to encourage more voter participation. So those are the items that are included in the survey on the Be Heard Vancouver project page. And that's just a quick run through of some of the topics that are included in that survey. For more information about any of those and to kind of expand on them, you should visit the Be Heard Vancouver project page. But I don't want to spend too much time talking to you. I want to open it up to some questions, and it looks like we've had 2 additional people join us this evening. Welcome. Glenn Young is from the task force, and he is here to answer some questions. I didn't see anybody put any questions in the chat. So if you would like to unmute yourself and ask a question, we can start answering those for you. Mr. Brockie?
Hey, good evening, folks. I got a question for you. You kind of listed a lot of items there. Could you break these down into maybe what is your short-term or immediate goals? What are your longer range goals? I mean, you listed a lot of topics there, so is this just all in one pool, or is there immediate short-term goals versus longer-term goals?
And all of those items, and you're absolutely right, it is an extremely comprehensive list, but all of those items are items that the task force is seeking feedback on. So when you take the survey, if you haven't already, each item has a brief description and a budgetary impact listed associated with it. You can also, by visiting the project page, see the meeting notes from various meetings and get a little bit more clarification on what some of those mean. So we're seeking feedback on all of those things. So there really isn't out of those items that I covered, a short list. We're looking to hear back from you as to what you think should be presented to Vancouver City Council.
Okay. And in regards, you mentioned having citywide internet so people could participate better in meetings and city activities. Will I find the cost for that there?
So there will not be a specific cost. There is a budgetary impact of what the task force believes it may cost. But if something like that were proposed, a more efficient cost study would be conducted prior to instituting anything like that.
Okay, but I will see some monetary figure.
You won't see a dollar amount figure. So I believe on the survey it is ranked as minor budgetary impact, kind of that type of grade, minor, significant, but there wouldn't be a dollar amount associated with it saying it would cost specifically X amount of dollars to do.
Okay, I'll take a look at that, but it doesn't sound very definitive for really trying to get what the financial impact is of decisions. So, you could weed out high cost ones and try to see them a little better, I guess, is what I was getting at there.
You're muted, Glenn.
I was wondering if I could take a shot at answering that real quick.
Sure.
So we have discussed that. None of us on the task force are, professionals with budgetary items and things like that. So in our discussions, we have taken some of that general context into account of how, something might be a pretty major expense, something might be a really minor expense. And we've come up with this comprehensive list, and we're really looking for feedback. And that's kind of where we get to, it wasn't us, but it was determined whether, and we gave it basically 3 different grades for expense. And that is really specifically so the community can look at it and say, well, it's a good idea. I can see it kind of helping a little bit, but it's expensive, whereas you might be able to pick out some things that look on, the really small budgetary impact that can have a significant impact. So this whole thing is about bringing it to the community and letting everybody weigh in. And we haven't really gone into any depth on like exact costs or anything like that, because a lot of this information may not end up in our final recommendation. So that's the whole reason why we're coming to the community, is we're trying to get that feedback.
Okay, one question then on feedback. The city seems to be kind of strapped at time in getting feedback. So have you, how do you value the feedback you get to weigh? Is it just from a selected group of responses, or am I getting feedback from the city? Have you developed any type of a model to try to weigh, are we getting, a valid response, or are we just getting a select pool of response?
I can take that. So we solicit feedback through a number of different sources, and we encourage maximum participation by all residents. But as you are aware, the most engaged folks tend to be who we hear from most often. One of the reasons why my position was created was to be able to reach out to some of those residents who aren't as engaged. And COVID has complicated those efforts because now we're all here virtually. But we're constantly trying to reach underrepresented groups that live in our city, and just general residents who would normally participate in the process, to encourage them to participate in the process, because the more feedback we get, the better.
Okay, thank you, Tony.
You're welcome. Mr. Poland asked a question in the chat asking, how can we train leaders not to do microaggressions and denial of bigotry, including racism, I believe it's autism, etc. And then he commented, Glenn knows the issue I brought up with the LCC. I'll take a quick stab at that. The city is moving in a direction to, we're reviewing proposals that would provide diversity, equity, and inclusion training to city staff, and not just kind of a training program that would just be a one-off, you sit through a presentation and check a box. I can tell you that the city is really working hard to provide a training regimen and schedule that will get to the heart of some of those issues that you had mentioned in your question, and really make sure that we are treating all of our residents with a high level of service and respect, and trying to eliminate those items. And I don't know if that answers your question, but I can tell you we are working on that, and not just kind of who will be involved in the training. This training is going to be designed to be given to every single city employee, including city council, and including all members who serve on boards and commissions and any task forces that are in existence at that time. So it'll be everybody. So from the mayor to the city manager, all the way down to our dedicated employees who monitor traffic, parking issues in downtown. And you're welcome to go ahead, Glenn.
I could just add a little bit to that too. I firmly believe that we, as a community, we just have to be more in communication with each other. There has to be a much closer link between the city council and the people that live in this city. And I'll be honest, David, we've had some conversations, and you've brought things to my attention that I had never thought of before. And so this is kind of one of the concepts that I have proposed is, and we talked about it, with all the task force members, but how do we expand the connection between the city council and the community? And we've come up with several different ideas, but really it takes that intimate exchange of information to be able to truly understand different people, different groups, different demographics of the city. And I don't think the way we are currently structured, we're able to achieve that very much. So we've talked about lots of different ways of trying to increase the ability for the city council to have more contact with people in the city.
David asked, will many minority people be doing the training for their own peoples, or one person for all? There are several companies that the city is considering. I personally sit on the review committee for those organizations. They were required to submit proposals for review, and so it would be a team of people providing that training, not just an individual. And there is an emphasis on a business that is composed of people of minorities, but ultimately it'll be the city is required to follow a very explicit process for hiring someone to do this type of work, and so we're pursuing that process. And you're welcome to, we're a small group, so you're welcome to unmute if you'd like and ask your questions. David asked, did the city contact? Oh, hi. Yep, you feel free to speak up.
Thank you for listening to us, for one thing. Clearly, there's a lot of minority people here, not only the deaf community, but in the deaf community, there's also Black deaf, and there's people who immigrated here, including not documented people. So we have hearing and we have deaf diversity here, and there's so many communities, a lot of Asian people from different countries that immigrate here. and not all people feel safe to speak out for their issues. They don't feel heard. So I'm happy there's a task force that's listening, but there's not, like you said, there's only a few people that show up to speak, and there's reasons for that. But the more real, not superficial, but real evidence again and again that's shown by the city to listen to people and not just one token group, okay, the more people will feel safe to show up and speak out again. If they recognize one leader from one community is being listened, they might say, maybe I'll test the water and see what happens. So my personal concern, if you can understand me okay, my personal concern is the superficiality that most white hearing people that are middle class or richer have. Not only denial that there is some kind of oppression, but how bad they respond when a person calls them out and shines light and says, no, really, you're doing microaggressions right now. And that, what I recognize is, and then by the way, it's not a party. It's not Republicans. Democrats do this too. Green Party does it too. Libertarians do it too. It's not a partisan thing. And it doesn't even have to be a color. You could be a black person and be oppressive to another group. The problem is a human condition, that we see ourselves as normal. We see our families as the representative of normal, and then we meet diversity. We meet people that are different. And that protectionism that we get. Now, I was born and raised up here. I know the culture here, but it just shocks me to this day, to the core, how cold people can be, how cruel and destructive they can be. And I swear, some of them really don't know they're doing it. They're just total denial of destroying minority people, just destroying them. And I even know that people gossip about me and saying, don't talk to David Poland. I have some friends that told me, they were told, warned, don't talk to me. If I'm the only deaf person that's capable of showing up because there's no access, there's no interpreter for this, and I'm the only one that's willing to show up because other people feel disenfranchised or scared that you're going to condemn them, and then they also see me being discriminated against, that isn't a safe place for them. But other communities see that too, and they say, David's getting oppressed. I'm not going to get involved. So that's why this is really a big core of the issue that I'm concerned is tokenism, that we're going to create some kind of system, statistics with data, rather than the humanity, the ethics, the moral behind a human being with their dignity. And say, okay, that's what my questions are really about. And they look kind of cold when they're typed, so I'm happy you're willing to hear me. What I'm concerned is, what typically happens is people will choose people that have a PhD or a master's degree in a company and do a contract, and these people will then do a presentation. And I can tell you, even at Clark College, the person that was doing a lot of presentations, nice guy, he's a blind guy, but he's fully hearing. I told him some things about deaf history. He had no clue of it. He had learned some things about deaf people, and he was going around telling all the teachers about deaf people. That was his job. He's paid to do this. And it's not appropriate for him to do that. And yeah, it takes more time to do it the right way, but the right way would be have people that are in the local community who are professionals, who are trained, but they live here. They're not like from California, they're from here. They're not from Seattle, they're from here. And they can train people what the issues are here. Because the issues in Portland, just across the bridge, are different than here. For deaf people, they're different. So my concern is, we're going to end up having some people that are very professional. They're going to do presentations, and they're going to end up with a few target groups, what they know. And all these other groups will just continue to be oppressed. When I was in LCC, when they had diversity training, they literally, people, members of my group would say, oh, you mean gays and black people? That's all they see for diversity. And there was more diversity than that in our class. They didn't recognize deaf, they didn't recognize Asian, they didn't recognize a lesbian, just gay men and black people. And they don't even see their intersectionality. So that's why my big heart of the question is, if we really want to support everyone in this community so they can move up, so they can get jobs, so they won't be homeless, rather than focus on how much it's going to cost us, it's more like, how much is going to cost us if we don't do this right? And how can I, as a person that studies social work, how can I help you guys to make sure you do the right thing so you don't waste money and do what maybe other cities are doing? I want to make sure you do the right thing. Does that help?
That's extremely helpful, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that feedback. And I would encourage you, some of those things, definitely list them on the Be Heard Vancouver project page for this task force. You can leave ideas and comments and things like that. And all of those items will be provided to the task force and shared with City Council. But you're welcome to reach out to me anytime if you have questions or you want to share feedback regarding the city. You shouldn't feel, please don't hesitate to do that.
Real quick on
Sure.
that note too, one of the things that came to my mind when you were speaking is that, and I kind of touched on this a little bit before, but there are so many groups. There are so many different, I don't want to call them groups, but different people, right? All those different, I mean, just in my household, we're multicultural. And it was amazing to me when I met my wife's culture, how incredibly different it was from what I grew up with. So there's so many different people with so many different ideas, so many different upbringings, disabilities, sexual orientation, all those different things. And there's only 7 seats on the city council. So how do we get all those people represented? And I think that's the key of the issue. How do we do that? And I think it's 2 ways. I think that the city council has to be able to people at their level more often, and we somehow have to get those people to meet with the city council so that they can be directly represented, if that makes sense, better represented.
Aletha?
If I could answer that real quick, do I have time to say something about that, what he just said?
Sure, if you want to reply to Glenn, absolutely.
Thank you. What you were saying about how do we get people to get involved, like go to a city council meeting? Of course, I've told you guys before, so I'll say it again. You need to have interpreters. They need to just be there. Not, you have to request it 2 weeks in advance, because hearing people, they just show up if they want to, and if they cancel their plans, they just don't show up. You guys, if you decided you wanted to go to a city council meeting, what do? You say, hey, hey, honey, you are going to take the kids today. You're with the kids. I'm going to go to the city council meeting. So you don't have to worry. You can change your plans. But deaf people, we get punished. I've had personally people tell me, last time we had a deaf person say they wanted to come to our meeting and they didn't show up. So I'm warning you, if this keeps happening, we can't afford this. So, we're like, whoa. And it wasn't even me, it was some other person. I'm not saying the city of Vancouver, by the way, make it clear. But this was a professional group, and they were threatening me, saying to me that because some other deaf person once had scheduled to show up and something happened, they didn't show up, that they're going to punish me and everyone else from now on if I don't. And that's a lot of burden of responsibility. So again, why would deaf people want to show up if they have a huge burden of responsibility that forever no deaf people may ever be able to attend again if something happens, they don't show up? And think about all the things that happen in our lives, not COVID. So many things can happen, including you forgot, your car breaks down. And here's another thing. Typically, interpreters, if you hire them and a deaf person doesn't show up within 15 minutes, they cancel the interpreters and they leave. They still get some pay, but they leave after the first 15 minutes. No, stay there, because the city council meetings, they're recorded. So deaf people can watch it later. This is good. This is our right. It's a deaf civil right to have access. We pay taxes, so we should have representation. We should be able to see what they're saying later. Just like hearing people can listen to it later. But the second problem I've seen for the deaf community is people that aren't in the big D deaf community. People have hearing loss, like vets and our senior citizens. They didn't learn ASL as a child, unfortunately, and so they still want to participate. I met a woman who some people don't like very much because she always would participate and she'd speak her mind. And she told me privately she's losing her hearing and she's feeling now she can't participate. You have to have accurate captions. They have to be accurate. And here's the thing, when you make contracts, I'm finding the county and CVTV are making contracts in California when we have locally owned and even deaf owned businesses here that do a great job at both these things. So part of it is access with the language. And part of it is also, I would say, welcoming these communities. I don't know how, let's say, Koreans feel or Black people feel or Mexicans feel, but I can say with the deaf community, and I bet you these other communities might say the same thing. Because we've been so oppressed for so long, if you wanted to hire one of us or you wanted to welcome us to an event, you need to literally go through our channels, through our community centers, and also you need to like literally tag us and say, we want deaf people to show up to this. This will be ASL interpreted. This is a deaf-friendly event. And so those communities might have lingo that you use too, but you literally should create flyers, create events, send it to these centers for these different groups and go through their channels of communication because it's not all Facebook event. I just happened to find this last minute. And so if you go through the right channels and you tag them with their lingo saying, we want you, then they might come. But first few meetings, don't expect any of them to. They have to test the waters and feel safe, and then word of mouth goes out. If they see that you're not deaf friendly, if one person, city council says something oddest, calls us hearing impaired, which is like saying the N-word. You do that, the word goes out, you'll never see us again. So that's why you need that training too.
It's extremely helpful feedback, and I appreciate you sharing that. You just taught me something, and I appreciate that. There have been a couple other comments listed, and we're a small group. So Aletha, if I said your name correctly, you're welcome to unmute and ask your question if you'd like, or share your feedback.
Thank you. Yes, you said my name correctly, which doesn't happen all the time. Thank you. Well, I just wanted to chime in. David, he educated me also. And everything he said was really on point because even I myself, as a Black woman, when you don't have anyone in your family or you don't have anyone close to you that has difficulty in other areas that you really don't understand. Like, a lot of people don't know what it's like to feel when you don't have health care until they don't have it or their family member doesn't have it. So I'm so guilty on that level too. We're fighting for so many things to be equal, but yet all at the same time, we're all learning still. So David, I want to say I agree with you wholeheartedly, 100% on everything you said. And I do want to tap in and say that I really do, being that I just came from California less than a year ago, well, a year, I made a year in September. It really does take somebody from here. We should only hire people that are from here. He is very correct because this is very different. We're different from Portland. We're just different from every other city. When I moved here, when everything started to go crazy for me, when I first got here, I was in a utopia. I thought that race wasn't an issue. Honestly, I was happy until George Floyd happened and all the races came out. When all the races came out, it became a very scary place. My point in saying that is that in Portland, when I go to Portland to visit my daughter, I feel very safe and I feel very welcome and wanted and welcome. when I come home to Vancouver, which I love, we're never moving away from here. This is home. But when I come here, I don't feel safe. I don't feel welcome. I don't see any signs saying any inclusivity signs on people's doors, or nons, or whatsoever the case may be. My point in saying all of this is that um, when people, if they don't feel included or loved or known that people understand where they're coming from, then it's hard for them to come out and talk about things. And especially when you're not from here. And so I thought the people here, well, I said, wow, Vancouver is a very different place. I didn't think they were so hateful. I didn't think they were so racist, because from outside looking in with my California brain, I'm thinking, you don't have any Black Lives Matter signs. You don't have anything saying that you're welcome to other people. But that's not the case. A lot of people are afraid. They're afraid to stand up. So, but a lot of people who are not from here would not think that. They would just think, oh, it's just racist. Well, really, people are afraid here. They're afraid to stand out and stand up. So I agree with him. My whole point of this all is saying, the people that come in and do any of this, it is vital that they are from our city. That's all.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Carmen, you had listed some comments in the chat. You're welcome to unmute and ask a question if you have one, or I can read what you put if you prefer. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you if you're speaking. I'll read it for you, Carmen, if you're having difficulty with the GoToMeeting platform. Carmen had mentioned we need people to understand cultures and how to best reach out. Build rapport and trust is needed. Not everyone will respond or see a Facebook post or newspaper article or has internet access. Need to learn communication, need to communicate in different avenues and provide resources for various groups in our community. And she mentioned she had agreed with what Dave said, and it's okay that your mic isn't working, no problem. Hopefully I accurately communicated what you listed. Pat Gelada, one of our other task force members, has joined us. Welcome, Pat. Does anybody have additional questions for our task force members?
I apologize for being late. I was tied up at Kaiser. You know how that goes.
No worries. Yep, no worries. It looks like there isn't somebody else joining us, so we'll let them join. While we're waiting for that person to join, this video will be shared on the Task Force's Be Heard Vancouver project page. That is also where you can find the link to take their feedback survey. It's extremely critical, especially for our participants this evening who have shared. Please take that survey and provide feedback. You're definitely composed of the voices that the task force is looking to hear back from, and you are welcome to also leave ideas or suggestions on that page as well. We would really, really like that feedback. And our new participant, welcome. We're in our question and answer period, so if you have any questions you would like to ask our two task force representatives, you're welcome to unmute and ask. We're a small group, so you can unmute and ask if you'd like. And that's okay if you don't have any questions. Having come late, as I was just mentioning to the group, this presentation will be available online for viewing. And then we also have a second virtual session this Thursday at 6 p.m. as well. I would encourage you that if you have neighbors and they're available, to have them join us as well, but both will be recorded and shared on the Be Heard page as well. The survey does close though on October 30th, which is next Friday, to give the task force sufficient time to collate all of the results and get it into a presentation format to share with council in December. And there were a couple more questions in the chat. Carmen asked what training is available to staff currently regarding diversity, and has there been thought to share this with volunteers such as on committees, councils, and other volunteer positions dealing with the community? We had touched on this a little bit earlier. The city is currently going through a request for proposal process with some organizations that provide diversity, equity, and inclusion training. The city has committed to provide every single city employee and member of council and our boards and commissions that type of training, and it's geared towards being comprehensive training that is more robust than the typical training that you would find as an employee when you have to go sit through a 2-hour mandatory training. This is meant to be an ongoing program that provides comprehensive training, and likely there will be some sort of announcement regarding that, but it is going to include every single city employee and any of the supplemental organizations that assist us. So everybody's comments that were included in the chat, these will be saved and shared with the entire task force. If nobody else has specific questions, as I can't stress it enough, please visit beheardvancouver.org and take the task force's survey. And we really appreciate your time this evening. And that's all we have from our perspective, unless anybody has any additional questions. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and please encourage anybody who couldn't join us this evening to join us on Thursday at the same time, and the meeting details are listed on the Be Heard Vancouver page for folks to log in. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you, Tony. And again,